At Staples Business Advantage, nothing can top the smarts and instincts of the thousands of experts on our team. While AI excels at
processing data, automating tasks, and providing insights for better decision-making.
And when they're used together, they're far more powerful than either is alone. Whoa.
I've never felt more alive.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations, plus our team's experience to make business easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
I think it's important to remember why you're doing it. I've always wanted to develop a disruptive technology and commercialise it. That's the reason I became an engineer. And to have that forefront in your mind, I think it helps you through the lows. But there are also amazing amounts of highs.
Hi, and welcome back to Shares for Beginners. I'm Phil Muscatello. For the past few episodes, I've been focusing on market reactions to the virus. I don't know about you, but I'm getting tired of the relentless focus, and that's why this episode is a change of pace. A refreshing cleanser to look forward to better times and the optimistic promise of technology and innovation enabled by capital. I'm speaking with founder and Chief Technology Officer of the Hazer Group, Dr. Andrew Canegio. G'day, Andrew.
Hey, Phil. How you going?
Really good. Now, I met Andrew. I met you last year at the ASX Small and Mid-Cap Conference in Sydney, and I was intrigued by the technology that he was describing. The company produces hydrogen and graphite in a unique process that assists in decarbonisation. So, Andrew, your PhD was gained in studying this technology. What got you interested in the first place?
Well, I'm generally interested in innovations in general, especially global impacting technologies. Essentially, it came down to looking at an old idea, an old technology with new eyes. The idea of the process of methane decomposition has been around for a long time, since the 50s, in fact. Mm-hmm. There's been research in academia since then, but it's never really been commercialised. One of the inputs that I had is to identify what was the root cause why it hasn't been commercialised. And it all came down to the simplicity of the catalyst. And so just by looking at that different change in viewpoint, we were able to make something that was commercial.
Okay, so tell us about the process and how Hazer is developing this process.
The process essentially involves taking a hydrocarbon in methane. Hydrogen can be made using methane and is done globally. About 90% of the world's hydrogen is made using methane or fossil fuels in general. But what happens is the byproduct of it tends to be a lot of CO2, and so much CO2, in fact, that it's more than if you just burnt the fossil fuels to begin with. What we do is, instead of producing CO2, we capture the carbon component of the methane as solid graphite. And we're able to do that essentially by using a catalyst. The key is we are able to use a catalyst that is so cheap that it can be essentially consumed by the process economically. We literally use dirt. So iron ore is what we use, and you can literally take a handful of dirt from the Pilbara and it can be used in this reactor.
The basic point of the process is to come up with hydrogen, and there's going to be a hydrogen wave coming up. I think a lot of people aren't aware of, in decarbonisation, that people think about solar and they think about wind power, but hydrogen is going to be an important part in the future. Can you tell us a bit about the hydrogen wave that's coming?
Absolutely. Well, hydrogen wave is coming about because of those renewable opportunities. So renewables itself, whether it be solar or wind or what have you, the price on these technologies is coming down dramatically. And what hydrogen does is enables the transportation of that energy. As the renewable costs go down, that is still only benefiting those local areas that have those renewables. The opportunity is to be able to export that energy. Now, one good example is Australia. We have a lot of solar, we have a lot of wind, and a way you can export that is to turn that renewable energy into hydrogen. That hydrogen can then be compressed or liquefied and it can be exported. So that's one of the key advantages. So it actually does come from the renewable sector, this push for hydrogen. Hydrogen is obviously a very clean energy transporter, in a sense, energy carrier. You can oxidize it using either combustion or you can use a fuel cell, and you can produce electricity from it. So it can be completely clean, but as long as the hydrogen itself is produced in a clean way.
So in the future, with electric cars, people are thinking that you have to have the batteries to power them, but hydrogen is an alternative fuel source for electric vehicles. Is that the case?
In both cases, you're having a solution that is electrification of a vehicle. So both a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle and a battery vehicle uses electricity. The only difference is the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle has an onboard energy source. So it produces its own electricity on board, and it produces it from the hydrogen via a fuel cell. It still relies on electricity to operate. What we believe is there will be horses for courses as regards to the usage of different technologies, whether it be battery electric vehicles or hydroelectric vehicles, in the same way that there's a shared market between petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles. There's an advantage on each of them for different aspects of usage. Now, we believe that hydrogen itself has a higher range and faster refueling times. So it will have advantages in the longer haul type of transport and the longer distances, so haulage, buses, those kind of things. Whereas the short day-to-day type transports, residential use, those kind of things, will rely more heavily on battery type. And one of the advantages that Hazer has is it kind of has a foot in each camp, in the sense that we obviously can provide a clean form of hydrogen for use in hydrogen fuel cells, but our graphite can also be used in a variety of different areas. And one of those areas that we're investigating is in the use of batteries, so lithium-ion batteries. I'm not sure if it's well known that lithium-ion batteries uses quite a lot of high-value graphite. What we might be able to do is replace what traditionally is derived either from synthetic sources like petroleum coke or through mined graphite, and to instead use our own. Now, the advantages of that might be the properties in itself. We have quite unique forms of graphitic carbon that we can produce. But it is also in the form of the CO2 component associated with the production of that. Obviously, if we have a process that is sequestering CO2, like in the instance that we're talking about, you essentially have a green carbon that you're utilizing for those purposes. So not only do you have electrification of a vehicle, but you also have a very green component that's coming in or going into that product itself.
Yeah, I know you've used the term sequestration, but it's almost like it's, what's it, carbon positive, carbon negative? I can't actually work out how to describe it, but you're actually taking carbon out of the system and producing a usable byproduct, aren't you, with that carbon? Because graphite basically is carbon, isn't it?
Graphite is carbon, that's right. Yeah, it's a different form of carbon. Essentially, yeah, so on the sequestration topic, yeah, we are sequestrating CO2 by carbon in the fossil fuel, but also in biogas. So if we're able to use biogas instead of natural gas, we essentially go down the path you mentioned, so carbon negative. Now, biogas is derived from a biogenic process. It's gone through biological sources to some degree initially, and so it's captured CO2 from the atmosphere via plants through photosynthesis. If you then produce biogas out of that, and you crack that biogas using our process, and by crack we mean our process, you produce hydrogen and carbon. So you're essentially storing that carbon that was once in the atmosphere as a solid form of carbon, which has on uses. That's what we classify as a carbon negative scenario. And it can be quite large amounts of sequestration that you're doing via this process.
When you first started with this process, was graphite part of the idea in the initial phases, or was it something that you realised that along the way of development?
Yes, the market for graphite was indeed known, and it was always a requirement that, or at least an additive that we get a revenue from the byproduct in order to offset the cost of the hydrogen production. So that was always understood. The real question was whether it was a primary product or a secondary product, and I think that's what changed from here to there. What we were very fortunate about as a company is that both of our commodities had its day in the sun in terms of the market. It was quite attractive right in the early stages when we went through the IPO process. The graphite component was very attractive to the investors because graphite was going through the roof. And now going forward, when we're at the position where we're pivoting between R&D and commercialization, we're finding this massive hydrogen wave. So we've been quite fortunate in that the two commodities that we produce have actually been quite well received in the market.
And when you talk about biogas, that is produced basically from landfill sites, isn't it?
Yeah, biogas can be produced on a number of means. Landfill is one opportunity whereby you can basically just through anaerobic decomposition of landfill produces CO2 and methane, and you can tap that. And some places around the world, including Australia, do tap that and use that either as an energy source.
Yep.
Well, we're looking at deriving our biogas, at least initially, from wastewater treatment, so sewage digestion. And this is also a little known fact that a lot of the sewage around the world, and indeed in Australia, is treated by anaerobic digestion, whereby bacteria essentially consume portions of it and emit CO2 and methane. Now, we're looking at actually tapping that here in Perth for our next stage plant.
So anaerobic, that means without oxygen or without air, is that right?
Without oxygen, yeah.
Yeah, so these little bacteria are just working on our behalf totally for free, huh?
Totally for free, that's right.
At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the breakroom products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
Suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
At Staples Business Advantage, we help you select from 2,000 breakroom products, so you can be sure there's something for everyone.
Yum. Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
Human.
Okay, let's talk about Hazer for a moment. How would you describe the size of Hazer and what stage of growth are you currently in?
We're fairly early stage still, but I think and how we describe it is that we're kind of at a pivot between strictly R&D and commercial. We've kind of cracked the back on a lot of the technical aspects, and we're very, very content with the way things are at. We've got 2 operating pilot plants that have exceeded all expectations. And now we're at the process of producing what we term a commercial demonstration plant, whereby we can showcase the entire technology at a scale that is on the lower end of a commercial plant. And we're also looking at essentially having first revenue from this plant, whereby we can sell the hydrogen for end use, ideally in the energy fuel sector. What we'd like to do is to have this plant taking biogas from wastewater treatment plant here in Perth, and ideally used into energy sectors like buses or ferries or what have you.
So is there a local market for hydrogen at the moment?
There isn't. That's one of the challenges that we have is that the market in terms of hydrogen for the energy sector is very low. In Australia, it's virtually nil. So not only do we have to develop the technology to produce the hydrogen, we also have to develop the market also. And that becomes part of the challenge of what we have here. But there's a lot of interest in the sector from government through to industry. So we're seeing a lot of positive steps in that area.
So ARENA are involved with the pilot project, aren't they?
They are, yeah. So we've been quite fortunate. Having ARENA involved gives us a lot of credibility. We went through quite a lengthy due diligence process, and which gives us a lot of confidence in our technology and in the team. With this program, we're able to secure a decent portion of investment in order to build this commercial demonstration plant here in Perth.
I think this is one of the exciting things for me, and I think listeners would be interested to know, because a lot of people think of the share market as being very large companies that are that they can invest in and become part of. But there is the other aspect of the share market where innovation and ideas can be commercialised with the help of the capital that goes into it. Can you describe that process for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of such technologies that what we call disruptive technologies, where the technology itself allows there to be a completely different means of producing commodity or task. I think that's what we've got here. In what you asked about having a listed company go through this path, it's quite unique for this type of story to get listed so early. Because we're still in the research phase, it would have been unusual for us to be listed this early, but we were forced to. Essentially, we didn't really have much of a choice. The VC market in Australia was not that great at the time, and so we were kind of forced into the path. We're quite fortunate in the sense that our process has 2 commodities that have large range of uses across a number of different industries. And that in itself fosters a lot of interest from the market. So we were able to generate enough interest in investors in order to list, and also in terms of having ongoing support.
When did Mineral Resources come on board? I mean, that must be important because they're a major processing company of minerals in Australia, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. Mineral Resources came on board a few years ago. They were actually part of the original IPO as well, so they did invest at that stage. Having their support has been instrumental. They give us a lot of credibility with their size and what they've done in the resource sectors. And they've also been instrumental in creating a separate pilot plant that uses the same process but different type of technology, which focuses more on the graphite component. It allows the tailoring of the graphite to a high degree, so you can change the purities and the morphologies a little bit more fine-tuned.
I think listeners, when they think of disruptive technology these days, they're thinking of digital companies and digital solutions and cloud-based solutions. But yours is much more of a real-world disruptor.
Yeah, it's a disruptor in terms of its being in the industrial sector. Has its challenges, though. I mean, I think you tend to find IT disruptions happening more frequently because it's a little bit easier to get to market. The scale-up costs aren't necessarily as high there. We have the challenges in the sense that we have to build scale, and in that there's inboard risks. But I think the opportunities there are quite large, and in our sector there's a lot of opportunities because on both sides of our commodities there's a large number of industries that require those commodities. So in the hydrogen, you've got an existing market for hydrogen in industrial hydrogen production. So for the production of ammonia and petrochemical refining, explosives, fertilizers, that's an existing market that's available globally today. So I think it's $100 billion a year market existing today. The growth sector in that market in hydrogen is in the energy sector, and that's what the hydrogen wave that you're talking about, that's what that is revolved around. And then on the carbon side of things, there's a whole different array of different industries that use the carbon side. We produce various forms of graphitic types of carbon just by changing the process slightly. So temperature changes or pressure changes or catalyst changes, slight tweaks, and you can drastically change the type of carbon that you produce, the different graphite morphologies. So in that way, we can not only try and tweak our graphite for different applications in the graphite industry. So for instance, in electrodes or lithium-ion batteries or refractory, we can also then potentially tweak it for other carbon-related commodities such as carbon black or activated carbon, which are much larger markets in themselves. So we actually have a little bit of an advantage over other carbon-related commodities in the sense that it can be tailored.
So Hazer is basically your baby. You're one of the founders of the company. How does it feel having nurtured it through to this stage for you personally?
Oh, it's been a roller coaster ride, I'll be honest. I think it's important to remember why you're doing it. I've always wanted to develop a disruptive technology and commercialize it. That's the reason I became an engineer. And to have that forefront in your mind, I think it helps you through the lows. But there are also amazing amounts of highs in the whole process. And yeah, I can just say, look, it's something that I would encourage, but I would encourage eyes wide open because it does take it out of you, but the rewards are there, and it's certainly something that if given the opportunity, I will take time and time again. So I think there's inherent difficulties in regards to taking what is a concept through to commercialization. There's inherent challenges, technically, commercially, business related. Point your finger in any direction, there's always going to be a challenge. There's a number of complexities. I'll give you one example is, for instance, our pilot plant. Being early stage listed, we kind of had to run before we walked. And developing a pilot plant is not a trivial matter. I mean, we're talking unprecedented process, and you're rushing to develop it on a budget. That's a recipe for disaster. And the commissioning of that plant actually took a little bit longer than what we hoped. It wasn't great, but ultimately we got there in the end. I think those are just examples of inherent ways scaling up a technology.
I suppose you're not building something from a blueprint that's pre-existing. You're designing and coming up with it as you go along, aren't you?
Well, that's right. I mean, even when you have very simple or very precedented technologies like crushing and screening in the mining industry, I mean, they still have very large commissioning time to ramp up to full production. And they're very precedented. It's been around for decades. And so you can appreciate when you have an unprecedented technology, you can appreciate even more difficulties going along the way. But it's part of the challenge.
So what is the timeline? Hazer first started in 2007, is that correct?
The research started, so I started my PhD back in 2007.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the company listed in late 2015. And now we're at the position, as I said, where we're right at the cusp of commercialisation.
Mm-hmm.
That's the next step where we can start to have revenue in. So it's a very exciting time. Quite excited for the time ahead.
Can you give us a description of the pilot plants and how they're operating?
We have 2 pilot plants. They both are in Perth. They're essentially of the same capacity. They use the same chemistry, but the actual reactors themselves are slightly different, and they're done like that to allow us to develop or to tweak certain aspects over others. The next stage, which is what we're talking about, is the commercial demonstration plant. Will be situated on Women's Point here in Australia. It's a wastewater treatment facility. And the idea there is to use the biogas, to treat the biogas and to utilise that in our process to produce hydrogen for ideally the energy sector within Australia.
What's the overseas market for hydrogen, and why is Australia well placed to tackle this?
There's certainly more appetite, or at least currently more appetite for hydrogen in other parts of the world. There's quite a few hydrogen fuel cell vehicles running around the world today, and likewise fueling stations. Australia's a little bit on the back foot on this, but we're now that we've got the national hydrogen strategy, we're certainly making roads into that endeavour. There are opportunities in exporting, whether it be this technology or even other forms of hydrogen production.
There's a national hydrogen strategy. I've never heard of this.
Yes, there was an initiative that's come about initially by CSIRO. But yeah, there's quite a few interested parties that have developed schemes and roadmap to get Australia on the hydrogen bandwagon. Andrew,
thank you very much for coming on, because it's just such a pleasure to hear about innovation and optimism in these times that we're going through at the moment. And I really congratulate you on the work that you're doing.
Thanks a lot, Phil. I really appreciate your kind words.
Shares for Beginners is for information and educational purposes only. It isn't financial advice, and you shouldn't buy or sell any investments based on what you've heard here. Any opinion or commentary is the view of the speaker only, not Shares for Beginners. This podcast doesn't replace professional advice regarding your personal financial needs, circumstances, or current situation. Thanks to Christopher Soulos for music production with that special Greekalicious flavour. Remember, music always flows, even when the money won't.
At Staples Business Advantage, our experts can help you find furniture that fits any design and budget, while AI can
recommend products based on preferences, generate 3D models for visualization, and optimize space planning for office furniture.
Take advantage of our team's eye for style and design.
And my eye for, wait, I have no eyes. Only algorithms.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations plus our team's experience to make furnishing an office space easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.